see on my first slide, on my welcoming slide, the Timisoara conference, which Petra and her team organized, and it took place in the beginning of November last year. I could not do differently than develop this talk further and further till today morning. So you get a very fresh version of it. I hope many of you recognize the title, this SFBT 2.0, as Mark McKergow's idea and description of developments in the solution-focused approach. And the C, standing for coaching, is coming from me. The little story to that, I was exciting to read Mark's article, and I was also kind of, don't know the word, hey, why don't you talk about coaching? You just talk about therapy. And his answer was, it's important to rely on what's written, and there is much more material written on therapy than on applications in organizations, where I see coaching as one possible part of it. So this will be a kind of reception call today. I think it's important that we read the stuff from each other and then make our own observations about our own work in light of the writings of on the thoughts of others. This is why I started doing PhD some years ago, to read and to reflect about our work in the light of the written things. I think this is science, to put our own reality into the context of others' firmer thinkings. And since change is happening all the time, this is the very first sentence in every Mark McKergow's introduction to solution focus, as he says. Also, my work changed during these years. And let's make today's call for an occasion to reinforce useful change within our work. And I would like to invite you to do the same, not just leaving me with these thoughts. And that's why I decided to do the usual SFiO Global Chapter meeting introduction round, slightly different today. In a minute, I will ask John to introduce breakout rooms and put you together in groups of 3. It's a matter of chance. So you might turn out to be in the same room with 2 people you don't know, and maybe with 2 people or one of them you really know well. And I would like to ask you to spend 5 minutes together with each other, so get to know each other the way you want to, and to answer the question from all the differences which occurred within your solution-focused work. What are you most fascinated with? And maybe, I know there are people here who are just working solution-focused since some maybe months or a year. And I mean those differences which occurred during this time too. Yes. And also for those who are working solution-focused since many years, possibly, what is the longest possible? Like what, how many years are there? 35 years? Oh no, there is no one here who's working solution-focused since 35 years. But I mean all the changes and differences, developments you did in your own solution-focused work. Please share something with the 2 others, what you are really satisfied and happy with.
Great. I am fascinated by all of these shifts and changes that Mark has been, I would say, observing, and that maybe we've all been kind of incorporating subtly. And of course, he's really good to bring to our attention and highlight these subtle changes that have sort of the evolution of where it is.
The question we got were differences that were already occurring in our work, which we are really happy and satisfied with. Wow, that's a really big question. I know what first comes to mind is building on what I was saying earlier, that we've been working, gradually making a cultural change in the way, in the interactions between these different authorities. I think that's a really difficult things to do, and I think I'm really happy that that things are moving forward in such a organic way, and I see myself as a facilitator in that, of course, but it's a cultural thing. It's a social movement. It's an enlightenment or some form of gradual process, which I'm astounded by, and the ripples effects and all that stuff. I see myself very fortunate. I mean, one person in an area like this, seeing change happening, which is very useful for people, and they're building it on their own merits, and I really like that.
I'm trying to use into glasses a lot more and see the positive more. And it's still, since I'm new to this approach, it's not automatic for me. So sometimes I have to consciously go back and put the switch on and say stop and look at it with different eyes. And
Good. I hope you had a good conversation and could find your own little or bigger developments and changes in your work. Is it okay? I talk a bit further on my presentation line, and then we come to your ideas and questions later. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sure. So I don't make now the big round with the introductions. Yeah. How come this whole thing? I suggest this talk, this presentation, to watch the changes in our work. Because of this, because of the unnoticeable little small developments, and sometimes it's good to make photos or stops or to watch them. These little changes and different colors within our work. So that's why today. And what started as a therapeutical approach and comes from family therapy that occurred in the coaching world, the latest around the end of the 90s. And this Peter Szabó's article on brief coaching is my first sign of the arrival. I know that he started writing it 98, but also the community, the Solvert community, with its start in 2001, can be taken as a very clear sign from solution-focused brief therapy arrived in the world of the organizations, if practitioners decide to link together and to build and share their practice in this field. In a very wide range, this book could cover Paul Z. Jackson and Mark McKergow with their solution focus, delivered a very understandable description, understandable also for the problem-focused world, I would say, and allowed for many of us a first or follow-up description how to work solution-focused with organizations. And there are discussions about how much we can use the findings of therapeutical research on solution-focused brief therapy for coaching. There are voices who say it's same but very different, and I love to consider this as the brief guys do, that it's basically the same things. We just sometimes have the good chance in organizations not to ask that much for instead at the beginning of a coaching conversation. I hope you are familiar with this anecdote. Today's call and the structure for my little overview of my practice comes from McKergow's 2.0 article. And I thought, hey, come on, guys, there is not enough reception about it. I read it and I started to search for all our communities, Facebook pages and LinkedIn groups for who reacts on it and why don't you write about it, people? And I was very excited and thought, hey, come on, there must be more ideas and meanings and reception about it. By today, I'm responsible for 2 translations of their article, and now we are sitting in this call. I will not bring Mark's article. I hope you read it. I hope you have seen Mark's SFiO webinar on it, or in recording at SFiO. And I only would like to show some of my practice organized by or highlighted by Mark's ideas on the emerging developments. So I just copy here his slide because I really do this little reception work on his work. Let's start with the beginning. He states that there is an emerging development from action language to description language. And basically it shows up in us asking more and more about noticeable things and not asking about what do you have to do to reach a goal or to come somewhere with your company or team. After preparing this presentation, I recognized that most of my examples will be from the context of team coaching. So usually as an external person, I get at the team link to an organization. So they have an idea, invite me. Sometimes I have the chance to talk to the sponsor and or to some of the team members, and then there is an event where I can work with them. So when I want to show you some examples how this more and more description language occurs in my work, then the very first thing is the clarification of an assignment. When I meet a sponsor, I ask him, of course, my very best solution-focused questions. And it's very easy to interview the sponsor on how he will notice that those changes, why he or she goes into this whole process, are really arrived in the organization. I think it allows me also to work easily with both, with the situation when the sponsor will attend the whole process or parts of it, and also those when the person itself would not show up in the actual work with the team. I can always ask, hey, and afterwards when they are back at their places, how will you notice that something happened and it happened what you hoped for? It's a cool thing to use or noticing language, because sponsors swap over to describe changes instead of describing they should do that, they should do this. The second thing, of course, all of you is familiar with the circularity or noticing questions. And one of my this year's favorite was a very enthusiastic, very energetic, and quite a wild CEO of a company. Gave me his ideas, what the others should. And then I asked him in this clarification phase about how would he notice that they started to do all these things. And my favorite was afterwards to ask him, and how would they notice that you noticed it? And it allowed us, with this very, very intense guy, to talk about fine and little changes already, which makes people more hopeful and makes change more likely. It would happen if we also recognize the tiniest, the smaller things. I mention here another example as well. I discovered this noticing language as well in the closing phase, after the team did all the work they wanted, and it's about to end our meeting. Once I asked them in a very tentative round what they think they would notice the weeks after, the days and the weeks after the meeting, that shows them that they are on the right way. Okay, I don't say anything new, I know, and you will hear these things you already do and know some more minutes now. But what was really fresh about it, one guy made notes. He just took notes about these ideas of what they might notice, that they are on the right way. And we played them back this list of ideas, what might show them that they are on the way. And after, actually it happened, it was after 2 months, we invited them to mark those noticeable little hints they were collecting, and we play them back in Mentimeter. This, you know Mentimeter? I can deliver the link later. So they could see, oh, in this sign have many people recognized, and there was this sign, and there was this sign less, and this was more. So they could see on a very basic picture, and could discuss about what happened, which signs occurred within the time after the team coaching. The next of McKergow's points on what changes are emerging within the solution-focused work is that we are probably less focused on single questions. And we open, here using the metaphor from Chris Iveson, like rooms in a gallery, and offer tools which make bigger chunks of the conversation. In my work, when I think about my own curiosity in this rooms way, instead of I have some questions to you, it even supports me in letting them to make the work. So if I wish them to figure out as many details as possible about their desired future, we're still on one line if I'm asking questions to them. But this difference to, hey, the main thing are the details which you elaborate within your preferred future. When I have this thinking, then I can send them for a short time or certain time and discuss in pairs or threes or smaller groups what signs of will show them that the future is as they want, or what do they see in the everyday work that make them confident that the desired changes are possible in this everyday life. So if it's not just me asking a question and they giving an answer, and then me asking the next question, it allows us to work in those rooms, to work in bigger chunks of the time, intensely and parallelly several people. And I think another example for this is that the gallery metaphor of Chris Iveson makes also clear that we can go back or forth within this gallery, and we can visit several rooms in several moments of the time. And at the time I developed the disaster question, which is very solution focused. Usually after a break or after lunch, I tell them, hey, suppose there would be something happening, a disaster, a catastrophe, or earthquake or whatever, and we can't continue or work together here. So you happen to be back in your everyday work. What changes would be there already? Think those things you were talking about already. So you visit the scenario of with immediate changes after the team coaching much earlier than at the end of the coaching. And I recognize it prompts participants and team members to make the consequences of their thinking at a very early stage. So if they were not talking reality before, at latest at this moment, they have to talk about the next time reality. I would like to show you one more of these things and then leave you some time with it to think about it. What does that mean for you, or what questions does it raise? But before we do that, I would like to show you the next one, which is instead of working with the goals, go more for best hopes and common project. When I'm talking to my quite often later team coach trainees, quite often when they come, their first idea why they want to learn solution-focused brief coaching is because, you know, these goals, and then you can go fast towards them, and then you reach them, and then it's done. So somehow the goal-orientedness of solution focus is a big idea out there. And I recognize in my work a slight change towards not even using that much from me, my mouth, towards them, the word goal, but much more I ask them what they are hoping for and what could occur, useful things for them. So quite often I just leave them the word goal and don't use it, my one and myself. And in team coaching, there is a huge consequence from it and a great benefit, not trying to use the goal thing as it's out there, but invite them to collect all their hopes, what they want to see, maybe as a result of the team coaching, but maybe just as a good emerging thing. And then when we collected it, we can just work with them all. And we don't have to decide, we don't have to summarize, we don't have to prioritize all the ideas. We just can say all this. And then we have like a big chunk of desired things, and then we can go about everyday details development. The only thing I have to make sure before that we don't build a new house at a very different place than my assignment was to work for. So what I got as an assignment when I was asking for how will you notice that the team coaching went into the right direction, I just can bring it as a kind of a frame for the whole team coaching, and then announce this frame, make it visible for all the time, and then ask, hey guys, suppose within this, we reach all these things, what you just mentioned. So I'm only taking care of the frame, which I got from my sponsor. As a nice metaphor for the same thing, I would like to quote maybe Daniel Meyer, maybe Svea from South Africa. As Daniel was at her place to teach solution-focused team coaching, he came back with this metaphor. And I must be honest, I don't know whose invention it was exactly. When all the things people mention as hopes as a result from the change process in the company, when we take all these things as chapters of a book, what would be the title for it? Instead of trying to sort the chapters and see which comes first and which come later and which we don't write ever. So this is a much more opening thing and much more yes and, to quote some colleagues here, than prioritizing or choosing from. So this is also occurs when I don't think about goals, but I think in hopes and what we are working on it right now as a common project. This is the moment I would like to jump and give you again with two random people. This time only 3 minutes. Can you, John, be precise on these 3 minutes? Throw us, please, in breakout rooms. And bring us back after 2 minutes, so we are back after 3 minutes. Okay. And the time in the groups is who starts first talking tells what was most exciting so far, or what did you understand for you valuable. Okay?
So it got me back to the presentation that Petra did on the conference about this best hopes versus goals. Mm-hmm. And I really love the image of the chapters in the book. And
lovely. Yeah.
It was. Now I'm definitely going to read the article and share it. It was a good incentive.
Yeah. I also got the metaphor of the chapters and the book, and I will use it tomorrow. I facilitate a workshop tomorrow for the managers of a hotel. I will take that over. And I love the idea of the disaster question in order to make people more independent from the coach and really work on the things that are already happening and the smallest signs of progress. Lovely.
I really like that when I speak with the possible clients or who will pay for it person, I could ask what they would notice and not like the goal or something like that. I don't use the word goal very often, but that noticing, I like that. Because in my training 10 years ago, we didn't talk about best hopes, and so I've been just studying this basic solution focused for about 3 or 2 years. It was different 10 years ago.
The different aim in asking preferred futures question and scaling question is to allow people to be in there, if I read Mark correctly, instead of listening to ideas in order to design the right intervention afterwards. So the same with in our work in organizations to allow to organize useful interactions within what they want is what we are doing as a team coaching. Someone picked it up as a possible team coaching definition, organizing useful interactions towards what the team or the organization wants. So this is our work, to lead them into it and leave them there. A little method from me, which I think I developed maybe now, is if you are sitting with the team in a circle, invite them to stand up and just move clockwise to the next chair and announce that the moment when their bottom will hit the chair, the desired future occurs. And then wonderful conversation can come up. What's different? Who's doing what? What we are noticing is different. What we are noticing about others doing differently. Very gentle, very clear. And I can spare the whole hated work of reminding people to talk as if it was present, because they are sitting in there. It's okay, it happened. And the little change which occurred to me within this method is, earlier I was always very conscious to bring them back, so not to lose people in the future. And now I leave them in the future and suggest, hey, if it's that cool, why don't we continue from here? So we continue the work from the changed chair. So we can build up on all the things they're just announced to do. The next change Mark posts is that we are talking about examples, instances, Peter Sabov of forerunners of the desired future, and to watch these hope-making, confidence-generating things in their current life is very clearly my invitation at the time during a team coaching process, for example. All the questions you know and use, what makes you confident, what can you build on, are asked for. And this was in a very, very irritated team coaching, also the big turnover as the team started to collect signs and things and good reasons for confidence that this somehow possible to deal with their current situation. And I already mentioned the room things. I left them with it in pairs to collect at least 25 reasons for hope. And funny-wise, as they came back, the biggest insight was the way they were just working within those hours. It were 3.5 hours in total for that session. The way they were working that session, the closeness as they could collaborate, and the direct addressing of every question they had, that made them mainly confident. So this type of asking for instances quite often opens the eyes also for what they are delivering on evidence for hope. Another method you also might be familiar with, I really love it and have to mention it, when we invite the team to walk outside the room and walk and take a sight into the window, or the minimal form of it, to stand behind the chairs and discuss about the team, who were just sitting on the chairs and making their valuable work. If talking about losing hangovers from family therapy, then I think the work with with organizations loses as well hangovers from problem solving. This is in the main part where interventions in organizations come from, I would say. And this losing the hangovers means also, in my eyes, more and more and even more partnership. there were some discussions in the community about the client is the expert, what do we do then? And I still hear Harry Corman being very clear about we are influencing. But I think what occurs is a big partnership in taking serious whatever clients suggest that they want to do, trusting and going with it. And it allows me as well, this partnership, if I want and if I can't do differently, to influence the the content of the client. And I did it shortly, and I got so excited about what they were saying content-wise that I told them, oh, I'm falling out of my role. May I say something? And within quotation marks, I could pass on something which I heard them saying and reminded me a piece of theory out there, so not their own life, that I could say, yes, that reminds me other people did it already successfully too. And then I closed the quotation mark and I went back to my usual role. Also in this losing hangovers from problem solving thing occurs to me how solution circle changed. The team coaching model, but way to work with team coaches by Daniel Meyer. As he wrote his book 2004, there were 8 elements of the solution circle. And by now, it was 2014, he did the 2.0. There are only 4 elements and there are no burning issues anymore. We don't invite in my practice any longer. I don't come up with the idea what burning issues you have. But if clients come up with an urgent idea we have to talk about what it was last week, what went so wrong, then I have to create the frame for them. This is partnership. And ending the session goes also in this sign of more partnership and goes more towards appreciative summarising. I recognize this preparing the end gets more and more strong in my practice. Now I'm happy I did it with you already. I already asked you about implications for your thinking of what I'm saying. So now I have 5 more minutes. I don't need to think about, and they didn't had the time to reflect on it yet. You already had the time. So the earlier we start to consciously make decisions because of the end of the work with the organization or with the team, we have more calmness towards the end. This partnering the end comes also occurs like finishing quite often earlier, which is like a huge present for the team. And what leaves to me is to be very clearly the advocate of how will all the ideas they gather to for the everyday life, how will this be possible under those engaged circumstances or those disturbed circumstances they have. So I'm the one who invite them to think what would be the minimum they have to see, that they know it was not, that it was a useful time and we did the right thing during this joint work. A little thing I'm also very happy about, that if I'm following this partnering ideas, this leaving the summary to them, then I also can leave the documentation to them. And this was a part in my work as an external consultant, which I really, really didn't like. And the way I'm working now allows me to ask them to do whatever they think is useful from it. Whew, I managed to walk through the points of Mark with my thoughts on it. And I'm curious how we shall continue in the last minutes.
question. We've been traveling and talking to so many people lately. And what I realized with Mark's article, and I really love what you said, Katja, and how you apply the things and what you observe in your practice. What I realized is that people sometimes feel excluded by this description because they're still like to do tasks, for example, to have exception questions or problem-free talk, whatever, do that very successfully. And now we're talking about these developments from this one perspective that you can describe like that. You can also describe it in another way. And I ask myself, how can we describe development in a way that includes everybody? We really can foster those differences and learn from those differences instead of having this one, the old one and the new one. Especially since I realized that, for example, we had Evan George in Taos last week, and he said, well, mostly at the end of a session, I give them, say them, next session, I will ask you what's been better. So you might focus in the meantime on that, and that's kind of a task. So I think we're all still doing everything, and so kind of the development is kind of an up and down and back and forth. And I ask myself, how can we, and I would like to have that as a question, how can we describe development in a more inclusive way that includes everyone in the future?
Okay, I have a favorite answer to that. And since I have an answer, I would like to tell it. It's not often that I have an answer. And I think a very good answer is what we did in this call, to watch how we started this call, to watch the own work developing or changing, and talk about it and exchange about the own changes. And I know it. I wasn't able to write an article about it. And maybe the real answer to your question would only be if someone would be able to put an article on it and really a quotable thing. But I think what a big benefit from the article of Mark is take it and use it as a lamp to highlight your own favorite changes. So I think I love this not knowing version of Mark's wonderful knowing article. And if I should be able to know what's different, then I think also my approach would be to go out and compare things, compare different practices. Is it somehow good enough for the moment? Mm-hmm. I was so much hoping for your question.
So one thing, I'm not acting as a coordinator here, just as an individual in the show, is one thing that strikes me is when you talk about no documentation. Mm-hmm. You prefer not to write documentation, and now you don't have to. I always ask clients, do they want documentation at the end? And 95% say yes. And the reason for that is that 95% of them will not get any kind of documentation back inside 3 weeks mm-hmm. if they try and do it themselves. Mm-hmm. So there's that side of it. The interesting thing is that having documentation doesn't stop them, starting to initiate some of those changes, but it does help. And mm-hmm. So I think for me, and I think it's echoing partly what Dominik is saying, is that actually we all have our own ways of doing things. And actually, if that works for us and it is solution focused and it's not problem focused, then yes, let's make it inclusive. Nothing should be cut out. And I get very worried when people say we should be doing it this way or that way. I mean, you weren't saying that, but it's now and again I hear that. It's we don't do that anymore.
Yeah, I would like to maybe to put add on the heuristic part of this, as I don't do documentation. It was about it was actually in a team coaching process of a strategic team of a business unit, and they were working quite a lot on the walls during the 2 days we spent together, and in the last quarter they were also thinking about how to proceed with it, and so and then there was a moment they said, oh, and now we need someone who's responsible for it. And I was like, yeah, that's partnering the end, yeah, and taking them really seriously. So I was thinking, yes, this is really important. So could you just please go around and put your name everywhere when you want to take responsibility for the things you worked out? So they were putting their names everywhere, and it was like, whoa, so much of engagement. They were really totally buff by it. And then there was a moment someone said, oh, and I could write them all these things, so we have them afterwards. So that was the moment I for myself recognized, oh, maybe there is another way than me sitting alone at home and having bad conscience of still not delivering the documentation. They can somehow make their own way of it. So this is the small anecdote part. And yes, I'm happy you do continue doing what's working in your practice.
I have a slightly different way of asking maybe a question in the similar direction, which is rather along the lines to ask early on, and how would you, the group, the team, the whatever, prefer to make sure you have the documentation you need afterwards?
Okay.
So just keeping the duty away from me, it's not my responsibility. Okay. And you have a choice, and that's it.
And you propose the idea of documentation.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Great. What else should we use the time for?
I have another question. May I?
Yes, please.
Kati, you mentioned three very interesting things playing with the team. One was going outside and invite them to watch inside the room or view inside the room. Was it that?
And that was one, yeah.
And then stand behind the chairs. And what are you asking them when they look into the room from outside or when they stand behind the chairs? What are you?
It's the same question. What would you? It's not the same question. It always depends what they were saying and stating as important. But if nothing comes from them, what I could use as a question, I would also like, before we go to lunch, it's very important for me that we can hear, what would you compliment this team for?
Wow.
Based on this first morning.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah? That can be a standard question, but quite often they deliver something what I can take. For instance, they mention, oh, and we really need more appreciation. And then I can say, oh, just before we go to lunch, let's start with this thing. I really heard how important appreciation for you is and how important it is to be seen in what you are delivering. So let's do it for a moment. And so it's quite often they deliver the question themselves.
Okay, thank you. And the other question was, you let them stand up in the circle and move one chair forward and then sit down. And as soon as their bottom hits the chair, they are already in the preferred future. That's what I understood. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, wow.
Little stuff, which often helps. Petra just mentioned in our first introductory talk that she works a lot with the body, and I'm not a body guy, but all the three things you picked up, Julia, are for me possibilities to work with the body, to move the body into the future and see what emerges from there. What else? I'm so happy I missed the time and I thought it was an hour, because now we really have the time to talk about it.
I have a question, if I may. As you may have noticed, I love to work with and think about the application of metaphors in everyday language. And this hasn't been a topic in Solution Focus for a while. Then at some point in time, Mark suddenly introduced the metaphor idea, and I thought, oh, how wonderful. Now it's allowed to speak about that. And I'm still impressed by the ease with which we use a metaphor of ways, of the journey metaphor. We talk about goals, we talk about directions, we talk about steps. This is a journey. And what would happen if we changed the metaphor for something else? For example, an architecture metaphor. You change something in a house. You redirect, you take the kitchen as a living room, and then what happens? It's not a journey. What if you take a music metaphor? You change the notes, you change the director, you change the instrument, and then what happens? I'm just curious. I have no idea where that would lead to, but what would happen if we applied different metaphors to change? Any ideas?
Can I take the question? Can I take the question? I don't use the metaphor goal and steps as a first small remarks. The longer I'm in this, I observe myself doing my own changes, the less I use those metaphors, I recognize. This is the first piece of answer. The second piece of answer, I think I use a lot of metaphors my clients drop. I don't ask them for a metaphor, so I made not very useful experiences with deliver me, how is it like? There were these wonderful methods earlier I used, but then I recognized they don't fit with me. I don't get that useful answers because I often didn't feel how much are we in the metaphor and how this would look like in the real life. So when I'm using metaphors this kind, maybe for change, let's say, then I'm taking from what clients dropped me. And I'm conscious about there is an insect which lives one day. It's just a 1 day life.
Yeah.
So I don't, how they say it called?
In English, we say the mayfly.
Yes, thank you. And then they are gone. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure if it's useful to give them a longer life. But if they continue living in the organization, I'm fine. So this is my way with dealing with it, and somehow I decided to take this question. And the question back to you, Klaus. Did you read the metaphor article of Leos Satlokal?
No.
Came out this, I think it's 2019.
Okay, no, haven't seen that. Is there a link to that, or?
I can give you the link.
Wonderful, thank you.
And maybe someone else wants to refer to this question from Klaus as well. Not
okay,
here,
so
not now.
We had a question from Anton on another topic. So, Anton,
yes.
would you like to jump in?
I was distracted by the metaphor. Really like the idea of changing the path metaphor there. Kati, I really liked your disaster question that you mentioned earlier on, and I think I can use it in a team that I'm helping out. Okay. It's a team of 34 directors who have a joint platform, but they are all directors in their own institutions. I've been working on the hopes and on the future perfect already, and now on Thursday I have the third half-day session with them. And I think I will start with, well, suppose this was not happening for any reason, what would have been different already? But I was wondering, would you add this question, and what would you have missed? So as some sort of best hopes question for that session. So what do we still need to talk about?
Why not? Try it. For this type of question, I somehow right now very much in movement myself, which is a metaphor too. So I'm just really working a lot on that one right now, because I really wish them, instead of creating a list, we have to work on this, on this, and this, which might occur as an answer if you are asked the question like you just stated, Anton. I really experiment with, oh, okay, and suppose this disaster didn't happen before this meeting, but after this meeting, what would you like to be able to see your, so just even there, try to jump over and look back. But I'm not always happy with with my capacity to make it easy and simple and clear. Sometimes it's too messy. But the worst thing that can happen, that they deliver this to-do list, and that's okay too.
So suppose the disaster happened right before the meeting, what would you be pleased with?
Yeah.
Suppose it happens right after this meeting.
Yeah.
You're very grateful that this meeting took place.
Yeah.
If I may, you could.
Disaster is also just a metaphor, you know. Maybe it won't work for you. And who's speaking?
It's me, Christian. So I really liked how you said that you bring them to the future and you leave them there. And I remember when I was young and my father would teach me how to ride the bicycle, and he would hold me, but I wouldn't see him. So I think this disaster question could also mean empowerment to them. If we would stop now and we would go away, what you would be able to do on your own or together, and take the coach out of the formula, so they cannot expect documentation and things from you, but really look at themselves and their colleagues, or how they can work better. So I think this would be also a good idea, and I really liked how you framed it.
Thank you.
Right, can you all hear me? I'm very happy I'm part of this webinar, because I'm really learning lots of stuff, and with a nice presentation. I really liked all the examples that you gave from your own work, but I'm still confused, and that's why I'm asking a couple of unstructured kind of questions. The first one is, which ties a little bit in with what Dominik was saying, that there's a lot of diversity out there, and people saying 2.0, naturally saying that everybody else is old school and this is the new school. And the response to that being, well, let's focus on our own development. And I can really sympathize with that. But how much, I mean, isn't it also a bit of a transgression when we are kind of imposing our own self-development and looking at our own different changes in our own way of working, and then kind of like making them very general? I can see other tendencies in the SF world which are also inspiring. I mean, what Plowman is doing with, releasing control completely in the session, not even having a question to ask, just asking the client what question they want, or the work that Debbie and Kirsten are doing with ICF and what they're doing, and I also see what Brief is doing is not exactly what Mark is saying. There's a lot of different in the Solution Surface School, it's different. And then we can go into all the different type of applications, working in therapy, families, everybody in every field is working in their way. I find it difficult making the jump from a personal development perspective to kind of like a general development perspective. There's a tension there, which is not resolved. And the other thing is, where's the evidence? I mean, if you're imposing that something is better, that it's better to be not going into exceptions, better to be asking notice questions, which I like a lot, and I use them a lot. Where's the evidence? I mean, do we have evidence saying that something is more effective than something else?
Okay, I'm quite clearly, I read Mark's article, and he really tries to stay clear that there is no evidence that what he calls 2.0 is better. So it's not a statement about being better, okay? There is no comparison evidence check on that.
I wouldn't completely agree with that. He uses language saying that I mean, he is assuming that there is a difference.
Yes, and if you listen to him in his webinar, you can hear him finding 2.0 better. Sorry if I'm saying so, but and that's in it in this 2.0. I think the choice of the metaphor taken from the IT world implies it quite a bit. And this is my answer to your second part of the question. And the first part of the question, I think this webinar will not deliver. I think it's quite clear that Kati made this choice for this soul talk for Temeswar, because she was that time very excited about the article, so everyone should know about it. And her usual movement is to make people think about what they do. So this is how this talk occurred, and this is how this webinar occurs. And maybe it's Jonas, you, and maybe it's Dominik, you, who probably jointly will make a talk at the Soul World Conference in Budapest on the other part of it. And that's not me delivering it. I'm still a Catholic inside church person, because I really managed to see my life in given terms. I'm just good at it. So that's why you got this talk from me and not the other talk.
I'm very happy for it. Thank you so much.
I very much like the question from Jonas about this. Is it a development that say we are all moving a step forward, or is it more like organic? It is in nature when you're looking how evolution is happening, that there is in different environments, there are different progress is happening, there's new forms emerging, and even at a certain point in time, there might be really new different, how do you call this, new branches are happening, which are so different that we say, well, there's not really so much overlap anymore. And I think this is really a very organic and natural way of how things are developing, because that's how it happens in nature. And I think I really personally, I love these discussions on exchanging, because that's why sexuality was developed, by the way, by nature, because in this way we're always crossing the information, and there's something new coming out of it. And that's what I'm, this crossing. And that's what I take out of the call, because I'm working in my way. I have my development, my questions. And for me, a really helpful insight was what you said, to focus more on this with whatever ways of questions, or bringing the attention of what is happening today in this interaction already that gives me hope and gives me confidence, or that shows that things are already changing. And this is something which I don't do so much in my team coachings, and also more in my individual work, but not so much in team coachings. And that's definitely something what I'm going to experiment with, to really looking more on this, what is happening right now, what did you see, what is something that you appreciate, whatever, how to phrase it, but to bring the focus in this. And therefore, that was a very useful call for me. And this is why I really want to add a little bit of peace and bring a new spice into my work. Thank you very much.
Thank you as well. I see Christian. John?
Yes, I wanted to ask to add something. And I think as an engineer, having performance and making the best decision on the moment and using energy the best is a challenge. And I think that there's so much complexity, and an agile approach also looks back and says, okay, what can we improve? And we might not see the most important thing and the most efficient thing to optimize, and what might be the best way to do things and ask the question for today might not be the best tomorrow. And I try to step back from this complexity and grasping and calculating and just letting go, like Petra said. Because if we go into, okay, what's this group? There's 30% like this and 70% like this, and today is Tuesday and it might work like that, we will go crazy. So I think having these tools and applying them as our subconscious dictates also is a good approach.
Kati, could I just say something? For me, what was really great about this webinar and your proposed talk in Timisoara was that you're bringing it into the organizational world. And for me, we learned huge amounts from therapy. I was at a therapy conference on Friday, which was fantastic, and learned a lot. And I think it's important that we have these discussions about what is difference, and we're starting to have discussions about what is difference between therapy and one-on-one coaching and teamwork, and what can you take from therapy that works with maybe 6 managers in a room but doesn't work with 20 people or 40 people or 90 people that I've run with. So I just think it's fantastic to get this stuff out there. And it's only by you proposing these thoughts of yours that we start to get that discussion going. And it's great. So I'm just saying thank you, really, in a very long-winded way.
Thank you very much. I would have a preference for some 2-3 minutes more, if there is nothing else from you right now. I'm quite obsessed with creating differences. Heard about that already? And I'm always interested in, when we did a piece together, like this webinar, what would you say you learned? And I love to define for this occasion learning as, you might think, oh yeah, you are reinforced in something, you are already doing it. And then after this 1.5 hours, you think, yes, I will do it exactly. You have seen it. Or the other direction of learning for this occasion is getting inspired to do more or different. You think, oh, I could. So reinforcement or inspiration. Can we just collect some things, what you are quite likely will catch yourself doing, somehow linked to these thoughts we made it together here? Please unmute yourself if you want to talk, and just start.
I love the metaphor of the hopes as chapters in a book, and what would be the title. That's a nice way to ask for similarities and to categorize or something. Love that. Take it away. I will apply it next week. Thank you.
I'm inspired very much by the disaster question, and I will definitely play around with this one. Great thing. Thank you very much.
I've been inspired by at one moment there has been written preferred interactions. And this is something that has catched my eyes, and I will use that because my client has seen that, and it's a reinforcement for me. Thank you.
I love in the chair and moving into the future. When your bum hits the chair, you're in the future. I'm going to use that. So that's a nice. Thank you.
Yep. And that was one, also really moving around. I like this with moving one chair and being in the future, and also moving, when you said moving out or watching from outside or standing behind the chair to see what is already happening now, and observing what has happened in this interaction already, and seeing the resources and bits and pieces of solutions already.
Tara, I have heard you talking.
Yeah, no, it was just, I usually think about SF for coaching, but that sense of working more in partnership, and therefore the permission to contribute my own knowledge and experience, for me, was very liberating. So thank you.
I like the co-creating the end. The more we've been working with Kirsten and ICF styles of coaching, we've kind of brought in this partnering, and it's very SF, it's acknowledging the client's initiative. But I like the idea of doing it with a group too. Been doing it with individuals, so it's a nice idea. And it reminds me of Peter's, urging us all to be shoky, job, lazy coaches.
The sabo Peter, yeah.
It's just a lovely way to once again do less and let the client do more and be pleased with what they accomplish. And it's a group of them. Thank you.
And may I just link to this because of this, you mentioned ICF, and yes, this is for me also a huge discovery to see how much SF work emphasize very many same things as the big coaching community out there, the International Coaching Federation does. And partnership is one of those. Sorry, thank you. Anything else?
I was very much inspired by description of leaving them in the future. And also your development partners like, oh yes, let's leave them there.
And it takes courage, you know. They go home and the someone else is sitting there, or their children are much bigger than before. So it takes some risk.
Yeah, I was really inspired by lots of stuff, and many of you already picked on stuff which I'm, doubly inspired by because we're reinforcing it again. But one thing I'd like to pick up here is the idea of asking people in the room in the beginning, what do you want to build upon, and also I have at the end here, what have I reinforced, and this idea of complete trust in the client's own process, and they have what they already need, and just reaffirming that the client is already doing good work and is an inspiration to us. We are learning from them rather than the other way around. I like that.
Our time is over for now, and I'm so happy you continue your lives individually, so you can take and use whatever makes sense in your practice. Thank you so much for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kati.
Thank you.
Thank you.